Okay, hello guys. So today we are talking about two things that I think should be part of every single hiker's training. And specifically, this is targeted, and this episode is targeted for hikers who are going through some type of rehab or pain prevention journey. And the reason why I want to talk about this today is because there is often a little bit of a disconnect between what the general advice you get around from physios, physical therapists, or whatever it may be, and what you actually need for when to be ready to get out on the trail and enjoy yourself on the trail. So let me paint you a picture here to sort of explain what I'm talking about. You know, there's a hiker. Let's say they've got knee issues. You know, they go out hiking. They've got knee issues. Like, oof, you know, this is a bit of a problem. They go to a physio and they say, look, I've got these knee problems. And the physios are like, yep, these are the issues, X, Y, and Z, gives them a few exercises and tells them to go do them. After a little while, the hiker starts to feel a bit better in the knee, starts to feel a bit more comfortable. They've been doing the exercises. They go to the physio, they say, look, you know, I'm feeling pretty good. I can get through day to day, feeling pretty comfortable, not so many issues. And they're like, am I good to go out and, get into my life? And the physio's like, yep, go right ahead, get into it. Take it easy, take your time, but, you can go out and do anything you want. And then the hiker will be like, boom, awesome. Now I'm feeling good. I've got the all clear. I'm going to go out hiking. And they get out on the trail. They're cruising along, having a good time. They come across a big steep descent, and all of a sudden that knee pain's back. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's back. And they go to the physio. They say, look, I've got the issue. The physio's like, well, you shouldn't have been out hiking. We need to take that out because that is the issue. That's what's causing it. And yeah, that'll probably work. And yeah, taking out hiking will probably solve some people's knee pain. But obviously as hikers, it's not something we really, really want to be aiming for. And that is a story that I hear, a little bit. And it isn't particularly great. And it isn't particularly ideal. And it is not something I particularly agree with. Now, specifically what I want to be talking about today is when it comes down to any type of sort of pain prevention journey or any type of rehab journey, when you're out of those initial stages of rehab where you may be very limited and you may be working with a surgeon or whatever, when you're sort of given this sort of return to exercise, you can go out and do what you want. There are two things that I firmly believe that should be in every single hiker's training program. And I really do believe that if you're coming out of this journey and you're trying to eliminate pain or trying to recover from injury and you're out of those initial stages of injury and you're returning to hiking, these things need to be in there regardless as if you're still in pain or regardless as if you are still making your way back and you're still not 100% confident to go out on a full hike. Now, the first of these things is actually some form of hiking. Now, what I mean by that is, in the example before, quite often hikers will get recommended against hiking if they're in pain, which, it's common sense because if it's causing you pain, yeah, obviously you don't want to be doing it. But then they get into this trouble when they actually get back on the trail and they're just not ready for it. So what I firmly believe in this situation, as opposed to you giving up hiking entirely and completely avoiding it until you're, in quotation marks, pain-free, is you want to be modifying that hiking. You want to be changing that into a level that's doable for you, that's comfortable for you, which you can slowly build up step by step by step. So if you're typically go out and do multi-days and you're like, oh, you know what, I can't do that anymore, maybe reducing down to day hiking so you don't have to carry a pack and doing that while you're overcoming your other issues, while you're getting in a better position, and then slowly build it up from there. Or if you're typically do day hikes and you might get out for 5 or 6 or 7 hours, but right now you can't do it, it might be a case of going down a local trail and doing 2 or 3 hours instead. And that's literally all you're doing, but it's still giving you exposure to hiking. Or it might be a case of if you're just a really beginner hiker and you're not feeling confident, it might literally involve an hour, 60 minutes of hiking on a really, really local trail, or even walking around your local neighborhood off the footpath. So you're going up and down on the grasses and the driveways and all of that. But in one way or another, finding some type of training which replicates hiking one way or another, but just reduces the intensity, the difficulty, and the stimulus down to something that you can do comfortably. Now, no matter where you are in your journey, aside from those initial stages of rehab, which I've mentioned, we're not talking about that, But once you're given clearance for exercise, you should be doing some type of hiking in your training or some type of walking in training. If you're told to avoid that for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, I don't think it's a good idea. For me personally, for every single hiker that I work with, they all, no matter where they are, unless they're in those initial stages of rehab, as I've said, they're all doing some type of walking or hiking. Some people might only do an hour. Some people might do 3 hours. Some people might do 5 hours. Everyone's a little bit different, but everyone is getting some type of exposure to that because it's very, very, very important. Now, obviously, there are a lot of limitations around access to trails, around time restrictions, and yada, yada, yada. And if that's you, then yeah, absolutely fair enough. That might be a different story. But if we're just talking about pain, if we're just talking about recovery, you probably want to be exposing yourself to that in one way or another. So that's the first thing that I think should be part of every single person's program. And when I see that recommended against, it gets me a little bit annoyed, I'll be honest. Now, the second thing that I really, really, really think should be part of everyone's training program is some variation of a step-down exercise. Now, for those, I've talked about it a lot on this podcast, and for those who haven't seen it before, the step-down involves you standing on a step or a raise, slowly on one leg, slowly lowering the other leg down the floor and up. Now, in my opinion, this is one of the most absolutely amazing exercises for hikers any hiker can do. It's great for knee stability, hip stability, ankle stability. It's great for building up eccentric quadricep strength. It's super, super, super specific for hiking. And I think everyone should be doing it in one way or another, whether it's a really basic step down or whether it's a massive pistol squat, which is, a similar movement for people who are a bit stronger. But what I often see from people going through these journeys, these pain prevention journeys or these rehab journeys, and quite often what I'll see is hikers will be doing step downs, and these come from my own personal experience, I'd say. Hikers are doing step downs. They're doing it in their training, and they run into a little bit of trouble. They're like, oh, this isn't super comfortable. They'll see the physio. The physio will be like, look, you're not ready for that. You can't be doing that. It's too much for you. And they'll ask them to do squats or wall sits, which logically, it makes sense because squats and wall sits are much, much nicer because they're on two legs as opposed to a step down. But then they get out on the trail and all of a sudden they've got to step off a step. And all of a sudden the knee's back, knee pain's back. And it's just this recurrent issue. In my opinion, I really, really, really believe that every single hiker should be doing some type of step down. Now, if it's uncomfortable for you and painful for you, then we want to find something that makes it more comfortable. We may want to reduce the step height. I've literally had hikers doing like 2 centimeters off the floor and building up from that. If you really struggle with balance, maybe it's using trekking poles. If you're, got ankle pain, maybe it's using a rise underneath your heel or whatever it may be. There's dozens and dozens of different ways we can change this around. But it's a really, really important exercise to be training into and be learning, because if you're not, and you're ignoring it in your training, when you get out on the trail, there are going to be steps. There's no avoiding this, unless we're doing completely flat hiking. And it's something that I really do think should be part of every single person's program in one way or another. So if you are coming through this pain prevention journey, if you are coming through some type of rehab journey and you've sort of been given those recommendations that you can get back to more normal exercise, but maybe the physio you're working with, the physical therapist you're working with, whatever it may be, hasn't really talked about these two things, maybe have a conversation with them and say, look, I love hiking. I want to be building up to this. Maybe I should be doing a bit of hiking. Can you give me some recommendations? Or say to them, look, I'm aware that I've got to deal with these step downs and these steps on the trail. I know I need to get ready for it. What do you think about me doing some type of step downs? How can we make that comfortable for me to build me up for these situations in the trail? Because these two things are unavoidable, however you want to say that, in the world of hiking. There's no way you're ever going to get away from them. So you need to be preparing your body for it. So, bit of food for thought there. Have a look at your training program. Have a look at your journey and ask yourself, are you doing those things? Are you limiting yourself because you're in pain, because you're been told not to do it? Because if so, you may need to find a way that's going to work for you. Now, again, if there are limitations, if you might not have access to equipment or might not have access to the trail or whatever it may be, or you're just 100% not confident about doing something, yeah, fair enough. But if not, those are things I really do think they should be a part of your program. So a bit of food for thought. maybe there's a conversation or two for people going through this, but I do think it's super, super beneficial. So I think that's enough on that subject. I think I've said my piece. So thank you so much for listening. Hope you got a little bit out of it, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.